Right, today we're gonna discuss about caching and tokens and all that weird things in Houdini and try to demystify what's going on there. So I have here, I'm starting with Cinema4D, and maybe some of you are not aware what tokens are, so I'm gonna go briefly, but by using Cinema4D, which is we are more familiar. So here in Cinema4D, I'm using some render presets, right? And this is a preset that I'm using to save things from my viewport. Let me reduce the frames to 20, and I have an MP4 and blah blah blah. And the important thing here is I'm using this weird expression. So let's delete that and let's go, and here's my project file, Thanos Cinema4D sit, and let's call the export with the same name, right? Thanos Cinema4D sit. Yes, whatever. And it gives me this path, say users, blah blah blah, desktop, desk project, blah blah blah. Great. So let's now press Shift R to render. And there we go, it rendered, and let's check. Yeah, definitely I have this Thanos Cinema4D sit MP4 next to my project file. So this is important for me, naming my exports as my project files, because I know that this project file corresponds to this export right here. It's something that suits me. It helps me very much with the dailies and the versioning, etc. So let's go and do something else now. Let's create a new file, Thanos Cinema4D poop, for instance. Okay, so another file, and let me press render. And as you see, it's asking me to overwrite the Cinema4D seed thing. And accidentally, I might press yes. And what I have done is the following. I have a new file, but I accidentally overwrite this file, okay? So this is a problem because many users forget or name things different, or whenever I work with other people, things do not correspond. I mean, I see a preview and I'm like, oh, it's from this file. I open this file and it's not the same outcome, and this is getting way crazy. And the more people are involved, this is getting crazier. So what solves this problem is tokens. And what tokens are, I have the Cinema4D poop here file. If I go here, instead of writing a path and everything, I'm gonna do the following. I'm gonna type $PRJ. This means this PRJ corresponds to my file name. So now, and I haven't defined the location. So now, if I press Shift R, right, it renders, and if I check the folder, now I have this Cinema4D poop file. It automatically was named after my project file. And let's, without doing anything, let me rename this to Thanos Cinema4D P. Oh God, Jesus, I'm gonna get banned from this world. So now, without doing anything else, I can just press Shift R, it renders. Great. And if I go to the folder, you see that I automatically have this naming convention. And this is due to tokens, right? And tokens can be many things. They can have dates, they can have many, many things. But the most basic use that I'm doing is that I'm naming my project files next to my export, so I know which project file corresponds to which thing. Other things I can do with tokens, again, very simple. If I go here, and I think I can do something like render, I can type something like this, and let's press Shift R. Probably I wrote something wrong, but I think it needs a dot. Yeah, it needed a dot in the beginning. So what I said now to Cinema4D is that next to my project file, create a folder called render, and inside this folder, auto rename this thing. I'm sorry with the naming. I'm really sorry. I'm just sick today, and I don't know. I had to make something stupid to laugh. So As you see, tokens can be super, super powerful, right? So let me delete that and let me delete all those shit actually. So this is a small intro in tokens in Cinema4D. So Houdini uses tokens in everything by default. Uses tokens when you write out things, either it's caching or it's image sequence or it's a VDV file. Anything goes and named automatically, renamed with tokens. Of course, you can name things yourself manually. Nothing wrong with that. I just feel that tokens is a very easy way to automate your workflow. And as I'm doing already this in Cinema4D for years and helped me greatly to organize my things, I would strongly recommend to try and see how these things works in Houdini as well. So in order to cast something out in Houdini, my weapon of choice is this node called file cache, right? And file cache is a node that can output from OBJs to FBX to Alembic to VDBs, all the popular format you need. It's a very versatile node and I strongly urge you to use that. There are other nodes as well. There is a specific node for Alembics, for instance, but I prefer to use this node for most of my things. So file cache node, here's the section where I define my path. And here's where I say how many frames I want to export, save to disk. Actually, let me start from here. It has this save to disk. This is what I use most of the times. All of the times, actually. I don't save disk in background, for instance. I think it lets you continue working in your project while Houdini tries to cast things out. And here in the sequence, you can use frame range or single frame, right? And where you are in frame range, a small gotcha here for new users. It has this start and end, right? And these are highlighted in green. And wherever you see green in Houdini, press the parameter here, and it will show you that it's either a keyframe or an expression, right? And in our case, this is an expression, which the expression simply says, find the start frame and find the end frame. So if I change my timeline here from 5 to 10, you see it automatically reads the duration. But if I want to define, let's say my timeline is 1 to 10, but I want to output 1 to 3 here, I can go either in this channel or in here. And let's go in here actually and say delete channels. This will delete the expressions. Now, even if I press it, there is no expression, there is no green color here. And I want manually to define that I want frames 1 to 3. So this is how you define your frame range here, or again, your single frame, whatever you want to do. So let's say I want to cast frames 1 to 3. Let me hide this and focus on the top section where are these tokens. So for simplicity's sake, let's change this from constructed to explicit. Not gonna go into details why I do that, but just follow along. And here's the path that we're faced first time we try to cast something out in Houdini. And you probably go nuts. You'll be like, BG go, just see, fuck, hip, hip, mum. And I was like, yeah, what are these? So let's cast this thing as it is and take a look. So let's save to disk and go to our project file. And I see that it created this folder called Geo, and inside it has this bird file cache one, don't be Geo. And I was like, okay, probably Houdini cast something out, but I don't want this this naming. I want to define my own name. I don't want this folder also called Geo here. So let's delete that. Let's define our own things. So one and very legit way that you can do as a beginner is go here and find your object path, etc., and try to write a name here. But then I figured out that this doesn't allow me to write a file name like this, right? I thought that this is a drop down for my file, the extension of my file, but it isn't. It's actually a way to say, look at this here and show me all the files here or something. It's like a filtering for the browser, but it's not my file extension. So if you try to do it this way, it will output a file that has no extension, and the file is not gonna work, right? So Houdini is a little bit stupid. So if you do it this way, let's actually do it instead of talking about it. Let me go to desktop and go to test project, and let's call this my Alembic. right? As I said, this won't write nothing out. It will write a single file. Let's do this so you see. It writes a single file that is called myalembic, but it doesn't have an extension. So how are we gonna create an extension for that? Either you can go here and do it manually. I think if I go here and write .abc, this is now recognized as an alembic file, and it might work in some cases, but in other cases, I found that it's not always working. So let's delete that. And what you need to do, instead of doing that, it's when you write here my alembic, you need to manually, unfortunately, add this as ABC. So if I press accept and save to disk, you see it calculated also some frames that it didn't before. So now this alembic is properly written to disk, and it's a file that Cinema4D can see. Okay, so gotcha number one is you have to define always the extension of your files. I'm sorry, either it's OBJ or FBX, you need to define that. Now, my preferred way of doing things is not going here and add a path and all this. I don't want to do this. I want to automate the process as in Cinema4D. So next to my project file, I write some folders with some renders or caches, etc. And this is, if I right click here and say revert to default, right? I'm back where we started with this hip mambajongo. So these are all tokens that do the exact same thing as in Cinema4D. And let's try by simplifying these tokens right here. So I'm gonna use the first token, which is called $heap. And $heap says wherever my project file is, the location next to it is referred as $heap. Very simple. And let's write next to our project file, I'm gonna delete all these things and write Thanos. So I'm gonna leave, let's actually do Thanos ABC. Okay, very simple. Next to our project file, write an alembic called Thanos. Let's save to disk, and as you see, it reads the 3 frames. And let me go actually to test project, and there it is, my file as Thanos. Great. Let me delete that, and let's revert back to my expression now that we understood what heap is. So if we do the same and say heap, let's say, in order to create a folder, you need to say heap cache, my caches, let's say, my caches. This is a way to create folder, and this is a way you also create folders in Cinema4D tokens. So next to my project file, create a folder and write a file called thanos.abc. Let's quickly save that disk. Again, you see it's working proper. So a folder called my caches, Thanos ABC, right? Let's delete that. And let's revert again the expression. And let's examine this other thing called $heap name. So let's remove again all this and write .abc. And let's create a folder that is called, I'm gonna leave it to Geo by default. You can name it as you saw before in whatever you like. So let's press save to disk. And $heap name, as it's caching, very briefly, it refers to your project file name. So if I jump now inside this Geo folder, it has my alembics automatically named as in Cinema4D, as if I was using the $PRJ token in Cinema4D. So this is extremely handy, right? So this is a way of defining your location and your automated naming and everything. So let me delete this as well, and let's go back to revert to defaults. And next to the heap name, it has also this $OS. And let's do again .abc in this example. And what $OS means is another token that refers to this file cache node name. So if I name this my first export, or whatever you want to call it, $OS refers to the name of this file cache. And this is very handy because you can have multiple file caches. If I take this and duplicate it, and let's say I cache something from up the chain, and let's call this Thanos, my second export, right? And let's file cache this, save to disk. And let's file cast this, save the disk, right? And let's go here. So both inside the geo folder. Now I have an alembic that it's called my first export based on this file cache. And now that I have another alembic, which is based on this second file cache. This is extremely helpful. It's like having cache tags in Cinema4D and name the cache tags. XP cache is different, which is, I find that it breaks many times. So let's leave the XP caching example aside for the moment. But as you see, I immediately know that next to my project file, these are my caches, and I have two alembics that correspond not only to the file name of my project, but they also correspond to the node that I export. And this is extremely handy because this is a very simple project, and you will probably have just one file cache, let's say. But in actual production or actual projects, you will probably have many file caches down the line, caching things and importing them in order to make it to work faster again, etc. And you need to know that this file cache corresponds to a specific file and doesn't overwrite any other file. I find this very handy. So this is the majority of the expression that Houdini outputs. So if I change this revert to defaults, you see the only thing that changed is the ABC that I had here. Everything else is, we examined all this, what it is. And let's see what this $F and .bgo.sc is. So $F is simply the frame number, and $bgo.sc is an extension. And actually, let me do this as an alembic. So just changing the path here, and let me go to my project and delete that. And let's press save to disk. And you see, it created 3 alembics, one per each frame, right? It's not very useful in our case because I want a single alembic, so this didn't work as expected, right? Let's delete that. But this is very useful. Let's revert to defaults. I'm sorry, a lot of explanations. I hope you find them useful and you don't curse me in the end. So we saw all of these tokens, what they mean, and this .bgo.sc, it's a format that I learned from Houdini. It's something like alembics, but it can cache anything, particle seams, it can cache, I don't know, geometry. So this is a universal format, let's say, that it's very light and very handy, and especially when you don't want to export things from Houdini to Cinema, I'd strongly recommend to just use this as it is. So probably what I do, let's actually, before discuss on what I do, I'm gonna press save to disk, and let's see, it created this geo folder, and inside it has all these tokens that we discussed with a frame number and this extension .bgo.sc. So yeah, this is, as you see, this is very efficient. It's probably less heavy than a single alembic right now. And this is the format I tend to use for my internal Houdini caches and everything. So again, $heap refers to, let's examine what we did here, just to revise. $heap refers to my project file location, which is this PC desktop desk project. So $heap refers to my file location. This geo refers to it's gonna create a folder, and inside the folder it's gonna use the heap name, which corresponds to my project name. Birds dot $OS corresponds to my cache node name, so my first export. $F responds to the frame 1, 2, 3, and .bgo.sc is the extension of our file. So as you see, this is once you understand what this is saying, it's very handy, and it can automate a lot of process for you. It can automatically reload things for you. So for example, if you have your project file in the correct folder structure, it will immediately see here and boom, load everything, and so on and so forth. So very final thing. When I export alembics from Houdini to Cinema4D, I use the file cache. I use the ROP alembic output instead of the file cache node. So it's called ROP alembic output. It's available only to the indie version, the paid version of Houdini, not in the apprentice one. If you're using the apprentice and you're missing this node, that's the reason for it. It doesn't let you to exchange data in the educational version. So the ROP alembic one output, it simply does what it says. It exports. It's dedicated only to alembic files for exporting. And as you see again here, the file structure is very similar. $sign heap. So as I said, you will see those tokens everywhere, and therefore I thought it was essential to do this tutorial to explain why these tokens, what these tokens do, because they are simply everywhere. So heap name, it means not next to my project file in Windows, it's gonna create an alembic called output. That's all there is. If you wanna create an alembic called as my file name, as we discussed before, you can use the heap name expression, and there it is. Next to my project file, an alembic called birds, it's gonna be created. So yeah, I thought you found this info useful. Let me know in the comments below if this is getting too complex or something, but I feel some things are essential to discuss before moving further. So thanks again, see you very soon.